We got Tropical Storm Bertha churning in the Gulf. You get my take on a Netflix documentary and an 87-night cruise. All that and more coming up on the next episode of the Wakeview channel. Hello, Wake viewers. Welcome to the Wakeview channel. I'm James, and here in Miami today, we have no cruise ships leaving Miami today. Um, so let's see what's making waves on Tuesday, July 21st, 2026. My first story today concerns Tropical Storm Bertha, which is churning in the Gulf right now. And is it really a problem? Well, so far there has been no broad cruise line changes, and the Port of Galveston is saying that they are not expecting any operational issues. Um, the one thing we might want to take a look at is the Carnival Breeze, which is set to leave on Thursday. One thing I will mention about tropical storms and storms in general, hurricanes, things like that, is cruise ships will change their itineraries and move around storms as much as they can. That's again why we always talk about flexibility, especially when we're doing cruising. Um, there might be times when you're going to go to a different port or a completely canceled port because a ship won't be able to get in there due to rough seas or high winds, things of that nature. So again, when you're booking a cruise or really any kind of travel, being flexible is a must. What about you? Are you planning your trips around storms and things of that nature? I think usually, people say like that September, October is a big hurricane time of year, and people try not to book cruises then. The trick then is that's usually when cruises are the most cheap. So all the kids are going back to school, so there's no more family vacations, and plus the hurricane risk is always there at that time of year. So you can usually find some pretty good deals if you go in the fall. Holland America is catering to Han Solo? Oh, no, no, no. They're going to be making some different solo cabins. Oh. So what they're doing is they're going to be creating these things called the solo veranda balcony cabins. Um, in, Up until now, really any kind of solo cabin, if a cruise ship has it, I'm booked on the MSC Meraviglia here in March in a solo cabin, and as I looked at it, it doesn't even have a bed in the room. There's a couch with a pull out, of course, and which is fairly typical in some of these solo cabins. What Holland America is putting out, they're going to be rolling this out on 6 ships, are these balconies for solo cruisers. I think this might be a really cool thing as there is an uptick in solo travel. This, of course, would be my first one, and I'm curious to see how it goes being a solo cruiser. Um, so what Holland America is seeing is a really high demand for solo cabins. As I said before, the question is going to be: is the pricing going to be worth it to, if you're only going by yourself? If you're going to have to pay, like now, if you go on a regular room, you have to pay the double occupancy for those rooms, even as a solo traveler. So it's something to keep an eye on and see how that goes. I'm very curious to see if there will be these really maybe a little bit bigger rooms on cruise ships for solo travelers. I don't think it's going to carry. I don't think it's going to go across any other cruise lines, or I don't think it's going to take hold. How would you like to be on a cruise ship for 3 months? Well, Fred Olsen Cruise Lines has an 87-night itinerary coming up here in 2028 aboard the Borealis. It's going to be leaving Southampton, England, and going all the way down to South America, going into the Amazon and checking out the Cape Horn there, and also going to Antarctica. Now, part of this thing with this cruise is it's going to probably start you somewhere around 15,000 US dollars. But it's going to be visiting 28 ports across 17 countries. How long do you think you could go on a cruise for? I like to think that I could probably be on a cruise for quite some time before I started missing some land and maybe some people. But yeah, it's something interesting that I definitely will be keeping my eye on. Now I have a story from American Airlines. American Airlines is trying to they're upgrading their tech game and trying to be more streamlined when it comes to their booking all the way through to landing process. One of the ways they're doing that is, we have these digital wallets now, and American Airlines currently had only used Apple Pay, but now they've added Venmo in their booking process. They're also going to be adding Venmo into their app soon too. Another thing, speaking of their app, that they're doing is they're upgrading their app so that you'll get more detailed information and more quick responses to things such as cancellations and delays. So with the new technology and everything, they're really trying to streamline the process and make it so much simpler for everybody. What do you all think? Are you okay with all the tech? I personally do. I don't like having a lot of paper or anything, so it's nice just to shoot the QR code from my phone when I'm walking onto a plane or doing anything like that. What do you all think about that? Are you a paper in hand person, or are you okay with the tech? So I'm going to talk to you now about the Netflix documentary Shipwrecked Nightmare at Sea, which documents the Costa Concordia over off the coast that shipwrecked off the coast of Tuscany back January of 2012. Um, I'm sure most of you know the story of what happened there. Most people do. And I'm not going to get into the actual story. I'm going to talk more about the actual documentary. It followed, a couple of cruise passengers, that gave their dramatic stories of what happened that night to them, but that was pretty much all they covered. There was a couple of things that would have probably been pretty easy to do that they just didn't do, like showing a map. Where did all this happen? What was the planned route? They never talk about that. They didn't talk about, show where the planned route was with where the ship actually went. Um, they didn't really give hardly any, well, actually, no technical information. Um, it was more or less just supposed to be, it was very, saying dramatized isn't the right word, because obviously it was a very dramatic event. But I think they could have mixed in more, bring in some, current, cruise experts, ship experts, things like that to explain why what happened, why things failed. Uh, you don't have to go into detail about 32 people unfortunately lost their lives. You don't really have to go detail into how they perished, but you still should probably give some context as to how that happens. Uh, I just think it was very lacking in that kind of information. When I watch something like that, I like to know, it's like, what exactly went wrong in a little bit more detail. They did cover, and they did a good job of getting you to understand how confusing everything was and how certain things weren't done properly. That came through very, very clearly. But like I said, I'm going to give Netflix maybe a 6.5 out of 10 on this one. It could have been so much better. Um, One thing I do want to caution is that people see things like that and say, "I'm not going to go on a cruise because look, Costa Concordia." They admit, well, first of all, that's all the way back in 2012 now. Second, it's one of those things that, first of all, is very avoidable. And I think because of it, you're probably not going to see anything like that happen, at least not too often. And again, that's one out of thousands of cruises that happen every year. Uh, it Cruising is very safe, at least in my opinion. If you look the numbers up, that'll back that up. Kind of like flying, right? Um, but it's things like that. As a lover of cruising, it it bothers me to see that there's people out there trying to make it so that cruises are bad. They're not. Um, it's the same thing. I got a lot of enjoyment when maybe a year ago, whatever, when I watched, maybe not that long, But when I watched the Poop Cruise, also on Netflix, I think they did a much better job on that one than they did on this one. I enjoyed that one thoroughly. You know, it's just, it's, and again, it's one of those things. You know, there's always a chance that something like this could happen, but the reality is it probably won't. So I do recommend you watch it. There is some good stuff in there. Uh, but if you have seen it, let me know what you thought. I'd really love to hear everybody's take. But like I said, I think they could have done a lot better with, like I said, just showing, you know, the map, the route, all that kind of stuff. What are the rules for, because I will say this, when before a cruise ever goes, they have all the navigation stuff. Here is the approved route that you must take, and do not deviate from this unless there's like a storm or a specific reason to do so. Um, like air travel, it's all done before the cruise, before the ship ever leaves the port. So it's just a good thing to keep those kind of things in mind. But I think you can watch it and still enjoy it. I'd like to remind you that if you're looking to do any kind of vacation, whether it be a cruise or resort or some tropical island somewhere, I would love to hear from you and like to help you out with that at James Cowan Travel. You can hit me up at the email in our description. And as I leave, as always, remember, wake views are great views. Bye.